All right, well, thank you for joining us, everyone. I really appreciate you taking some time this afternoon to join this session on automating your transactions through Ariba Network. You know, it's always a topic where we get a lot of questions from buyers and sellers. You know, what's the value proposition, and sometimes even just what is it? So I'm excited to have some panelists here today who have some great expertise and who are in different stages of the journey, if you will, in maturing with regards to e-commerce. And before we start, I just want to ask, just by a quick show of hands, who's representing, say, the buy side of Ariba Network, either procurement or finance side, and you're looking to see what it's about for suppliers? Okay, good. And then supply side, I imagine, is the rest? Okay, good. About 1/3, 2/3, perfect. I think that's more or less what I had guesstimated we might have, so that's great. So I'll just give some quick introductions to, I think, some core vocabulary. How many of you, for example, are fairly new to the notion of automating or B2B integration? So most okay, there's a couple who are fairly new, but most are pretty experienced. So this may be probably more oriented for the folks who are newer, and it's almost just like a primer of what is B2B integration. We use the terms B2B integration and automation almost interchangeably, with the notion that when a supplier is using Ariba Network, they could either log into the portal manually, download or pull down their purchase orders that way, or type in their invoices manually, or they could build an interface to Ariba Network that automatically pulls in those purchase orders or automatically uploads those invoices from their back-end system. And that interface, that automation, is really what we'll be talking about. And it can take a lot of different formats, these terms on the screen, but usually what it boils down to is that you have a document that's been formatted, it's been tagged, almost, if you can imagine, like a super HTTP kind of tagging, but instead of tagging, formats and fonts, it's tagging PO, header, line item, etc. And that tagging is done in either CXML format or EDI format. And when a supplier decides to connect their catalogs or the back-end website to Ariba, they're using punch-out technologies, which is really just a CXML integration from their back-ends to Ariba. And so that's just kind of the quick overview of what integration is and what we'll be talking about today. And before I turn it over to our presenters, I'd like to just give a quick set of introductions on who they are. So first, we'll have from Becton Dickinson, Anne Van Zaan present, and she is BD's e-commerce program coordinator in Europe. And BD, as I'm sure many of you know, is a medical technology company. They serve a variety of different healthcare and research industries. And Anne leads B2B integration for European life sciences customers. And she's really the first point of contact across the customers, the BD's technical teams, and also the local sales and marketing teams. And then following on, we will have Olaf Dubert from Lyrico, and Olaf is a QSS and e-business manager at Lyrico. Lyrico, of course, is a 2 billion euro global distributor of workplace solutions and office supplies. And Olaf is a member of the senior management team. He's responsible for all the quality, security, environmental issues, and of course, he also has responsibility for the e-business teams. And that includes integration of customer procurement systems from e-catalog all the way through to PO and e-invoice. Following Olaf, we will have Andy van Spijkeren. And Andy is Corporate Integration Manager at Software One. And Software One's a global software licensing solution provider. They help companies basically optimize their software portfolio. And in his role, Andy helps customers integrate their procurement systems and processes to Software One's platform. And then finally, we will also have Michael Weil from Ariba. And Michael is Senior Manager of Integration here at Ariba. And he works in conjunction with the Director of Integration for Europe and Pan-Asia Pacific. Michael leads Ariba's Europe integration team. And he and his team work directly with local sellers who want to automate their connection to Ariba Network, as in the ways that I had described earlier. And Michael's team provides the tools and the frameworks and the best practices to do that. So now let me hand off to Anne to present on BD.
Okay, thank you. So good afternoon, everybody. I work for BD. BD is a leading medical technical company. And I'm not going to read the whole slide. You can read it later when the slides are distributed. But we have more than 45,000 associates over 50 countries, and recently this year we welcomed CareFusion into the BD family. BD really has two segments. First of all, we have the medical segment that focuses on providing innovative solutions to reduce the spread of infection, enhance diabetes treatment, advance drug delivery, improve respiratory care and surgical procedures, and provide effective and safe medication management. And there's also the life sciences segment. That's a segment that I work for. We focus on continually advancing the science and applications associated with cellular analysis and improving quality, increasing productivity, and ensuring flexibility to help laboratories guide medical decisions and diagnosis. So my main customers would be big pharmas, universities, research institutes. Who am I? I started my e-commerce journey about 12 years ago in the marketing department for the life sciences segment. I started as the marketing assistant who created the hosted catalogs that were loaded on Ariba and different platforms. And I've been given more and more responsibility in the e-commerce space since. I now have a team of 7 members, and we're responsible for all the e-commerce transactions, both on the web and the B2B integrations. So why am I here today? To tell you a bit about our journey on B2B integrations, because it's been a very long one. What was our approach to B2B integrations in the past? Every time that we received an integration request from a customer, we acted on this on reactive mode. So we would never go out to a customer and say, hey, we can integrate. Is this a service that would serve you? We would just do it in reactive mode. And we saw it as really something tedious. It was a must-do, an IT project, and it was always a hassle because every customer has different standards. And we had an IT department that didn't have all the right people to do the development for the integrations. And it would usually take us around 3 months to get back to a customer to say, yes, we can do the integration, or no, we cannot do the integration. And about 6 months before we could even start on the integration. We received an increased number of B2B integration requests the last years. We saw a big growing number of requests. And we decided that it was time for a change. We really had to do something about the way that we integrated with our customers, because the way that we were doing it, it was just a hassle. It was not a benefit for BD, not a benefit for the customer, and it was really creating bad relationships with our customers. So what did we really do? We refocused on e-commerce as a channel. So we thought, okay, there is a benefit both for the buyer and for the seller in integrations in e-commerce. And we thought this is a valuable sales channel. It is not just a service, it's a sales channel, and it generates income for the company. So we focused on 3 different pillars. First, there was online sales. We had a website, we had a catalog, but it was not really performing very well. So August 2014, we implemented a new e-commerce engine for Europe. This was rolled out March 2015 for US, and we're now onboarding different regions. So that was the first thing. Having a new e-commerce engine of our website with a new catalog, recommendations, promotions, everything that a customer is wanting, because the customer is in a B2B environment, but they want a B2C experience. That's what they want. So we were trying to give that to them. This also benefited our customers that have to buy through procurement solutions for the punch-out solutions, because you can actually give them a B2C experience in a B2B environment. And this was really something that helped us gain more punch-out tracking. Another thing that we invested time on was, and money was B2B integrations. As I said, we used to do this as a little IT project that went to IT, and we didn't have the developers, and it was tedious. So we decided if we want to do this right, if we want to serve our customers right, we need to have somebody who can do this for us. Our core business is not B2B integrations. Our core business is needles and syringes. It's flow cytometers and it's antibodies, but not integrating with customers. So we hired a company that is doing all the B2B integrations for us. And on top of that, what we also worked with, we built a solution based out of our catalog database that can create these hosted catalog files that we load on platforms such as Ariba to be more automated and to have consistency in the data between what's presented on the web and what is presented on Ariba. The third thing that we looked to was the organizational model. We had done a great investment in a new online sales channel, in going out to a third-party integrator for our B2B integrations. But if you don't have the supporting model, then these are just two technical solutions and it will never be a success, this e-commerce story. So what did we do for the organizational model? First of all, we needed to have a mind shift. An integration is not an IT request. It's not an IT project. It is a way of doing business between sellers and buyers. That was really important that we started to understand that. It requires engagement, both from the business, both from the IT departments, both from the seller and from the buyer. So where before we received a request and we called our IT department and said, hey, we have a customer who wants to integrate. Here is the documentation. You take care of it. You handle it. Today, it is the business who is driving the integration request. It's the business that's doing the coordination between the different sales teams, between the customers' teams, our teams, between our marketing teams, between everybody who is a stakeholder in this story. So how did we raise this engagement? Because it's nice to say, hey, we invested a lot of money in a new commerce tool, we have a B2B integration, and we need engagement. How do you create such an engagement? First of all, we needed to make sure that our own organization understood the benefits of e-commerce, of the e-commerce channel. So we created what we call an e-champion network. Every country, because I manage the whole European, all the legal entities in Europe, every country now has an e-champion. So we trained a number of people in every local organization so that they know what the value is of an e-channel, so that they know what the difference is between a hosted catalog and a punch-out. In the past, if you said punch-out to one of our local sales teams, they would go like, turn around and just disappear. So we trained e-champions, we trained the salespeople, because it was very important that they know what this is, that they know what the benefit is, and that they know how this can help us better serve our customers. The other thing that we did with the training was we created a deck of information on how to handle an integration. And it's not just a checklist for a salesperson or an IT person to go through and say, yes, I've done this, and yes, I asked that. It's really a document that helps the sales teams to go out to the customer and ask the right questions. Questions on scope, because before the request was passed to us and it was like, hey, customer A wants e-orders and e-invoices. Yes, that's very nice, but we need a little bit more information. E-orders, do they want original orders? Do they want change orders? Do they want cancel orders? All of this is very important. So we've created, after the people and the training, we've created a set of documents and processes that can be used for the guiding discussions on scope. So we've, in the past 18 months, I think we've made a steep journey to make this e-commerce channel more valuable for our company. And we still have a long way to go. There is a certain level of maturity that we have already succeeded to, but we still have a long way to go, and we're working on this every day. We're increasing the number of people in the organization with a dedication to e-commerce. There's a lot that we still need to do. If there's two things that we learned during our journey, that would be it. Start any trading relationship with a meeting on scope, processes, and exception handling. Too often in the past, we noticed whenever the development had started that actually we weren't really sure what the customer wanted, and we started programming things, and then we started testing things, and then we realized that this was not what they had requested. So before you embark on any technical development, have a discussion on scope. Make sure that you know what the customer wants, and if there is something that you cannot handle technically, make sure that you have an agreement so that you can follow up with back-end processes to make sure that these things will work, both for you and for the both for the seller and for the buyer, because otherwise you're going to end up in a whole lot of mess. And if there's one learning that I would like to share with buyers, any type of automation requires standardization. And way too often we get integration requests where the customer, the buyer, still wants a lot of exception handling. If you want automation, there is a lot of benefit in automation. There is reducing risk of manual order entry handling. There's increased efficiency. I'm really a big fan of integration, but it really requires automation. So that would be my main two lessons to share with the team. And I've clicked too far. So questions and answers, well, we can do that later. So that's it for my part. So Olaf, I think it's your turn now. There you go.
Thank you very much. Yes, also a warm welcome from my side. As mentioned already, my name is Olaf Dubbert. I'm a quality and e-business manager at Lureco. Lureco is a family-owned company, and it's an international company, but with local structures in each country. And for example, if you have a look on the slide, you see that 50% of the German employees are salespeople. Maybe it sounds a little bit strange to be here on the event talking about e-commerce, e-catalogs, e-offers, e-bidding, e-orders, and to have such a huge number of salespeople. But for Lureco, it's still important to be in contact with the customer face to face, to hear and listen, especially that what is said between the lines from the customer to understand the customer. So the strategy of Lureco is clearly be online, be the best in e-commerce, but don't forget the people. So that's very important for Lureco. On top of that, it is of course important to have an excellent technical framework, such as uniform IT platform worldwide based on SAP, and have excellent applications which are connected to SAP, like web methods for the data exchange. But we know also that it is not enough just to meet the expectation of the customers. We have to overachieve the expectation of the customers. But it's a story I will come back later on another slide. What I want to do now, or what I prefer to do now, is to invite you to a journey into the year 1996. I went to the Lureco Museum and found an order of this year, of 1996. That's an order of 1996. Well, behind this order, it means that there was a user on the customer side going to the system, key in the product information, send the fax. On the supplier side, there was a user going to the fax every 30 minutes, takes the order, key in the supplier system. Well, if I look now around, some of you remember these times, but I think also a lot of people on this event will ask now the question, what on earth is a fax machine? However, neither the customer nor the supplier were happy with this situation. And at this time, there were 7 business colleagues eating a sandwich. I was not present at that time, and discussing about waste of time and money involved in corporate purchasing. The Ariba network idea was born and helps us to simplify life at work. If we jump back to the present time, then we know in the meanwhile that an EDI integration has a status of a project. But we know also that a lot of steps, processes, and analyses during this project are the same in each project, so they are not so different, a lot of steps. And due to this fact, Lyreco was able to optimize the internal flows and to offer our customers a service level agreement, which we called the 6-week plus commitment. Whatever the document is, whatever the number of document types is, whatever the format is, we offer our customer in 6 weeks, we are ready to go live. Very often we are a little bit delayed because the customer needs more for testing, but we are ready. That's for us very important. And we make the experience, and on this event I must say this, that in case the customer is saying to us, or let's say sometimes it's very challenging to reach this 6 weeks commitment. Sometimes it's very simple. In case the customer is saying us, we are working with Ariba, it's more simple than challenging, that's for sure. But another, I think, interesting question is, what does EDI integration mean? If someone is talking about EDI integration, he usually talk about electronic purchase orders, order response, delivery note, invoice. But the step on which these documents are based are very often less taken into account, the e-catalog. And we have to take in account that the e-catalog must be set up in a proper way, or let's say in a real-time way, to ensure or to avoid that there is a mismatch already at the very beginning of the purchasing process. And we made this experience, and therefore Lyreco is convinced that it's essential to have a dynamic catalog instead of a static catalog file. You know, a static catalog file means you have to create the file, upload the file to the system. If you have an update, create a file again, upload it again. You have to take care that the prices are at the same time ready in the customer supplier system and also in the customer system. Everything has to be synchronized, but it's not a typical process, a static catalog, to be synchronized. In Ariba language, dynamic catalogs is named punch-out catalog. And this Ariba solution ensures that there is an online real-time connection to the product database of the supplier. And that's very important for the following processes after the e-catalog. And I take one best practice to give a small proof of that what I said. We have integration with Käser Kompressoren, also a customer from Lyreco, which present also on this event. I think today they have had a presentation. We implement them in 2014. We were selected as pilot supplier. That's very often the case because we deliver uncritical products, office supplies, and we are much experienced with Ariba and the e-commerce part. We have a kick-off meeting, which is very essential to have a kick-off meeting to understand what are the expectations of the customer and what can the supplier deliver. The scope was clear. That means we have an integration from the beginning, means a punch-out catalog, and the go-live was in time. Also due to the fact that we know very well Ariba. Very often if a customer is coming, we want to make an EDI integration with Ariba. A lot of questions are already answered. We have not to ask them because we know the system, we know what to do, so we can go directly into the details and have not to cover the general points. So if someone asks me to make a conclusion or to highlight some points as a conclusion, I would say an integration starts with the catalog. A catalog should be a dynamic catalog or a punch-out catalog to have a proper EDI flow from the PO to the invoice. And finally, it's a very simple thing, but very important: ask, don't assume. That's very important. And I think the last page or the last slide I have give a little proof that how we see the things and how we set up the EDI integration with Ariba, but also with other customers, is a success story. 142 customers, 300,000 orders per year, 1.3 million lines per year is a clear proof that this business is successful. And maybe you are next year again on this event, and I can assure you that these figures will increase. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Olaf. So, just to quickly summarize, my colleagues here have told us about the experiences that they've had, and they've explained on how the progression has gone over the last couple of years, or multiple years, even with an old fax order. What I want to go into from our side, from the Software One side, and to quickly introduce myself, my name is Andy van Spijken. I work at Software One, and for us, it's important today to relay our learnings from here, but also a little bit of best practice. So what did we get out of it, and what have we learned? So what's very important for us? Because there's a lot of points during the last couple of slides from both presenters where everything comes in and it's like, I've seen this before, I've experienced this as well. And from our side, what I want to bring over is a little bit of the same information, but then to a more personalized experience to Software One. So to quickly introduce Software One as a company, we are a software reseller, but not just a reseller, that's where we started out with. Now we have transitioned in added value reselling and also software portfolio management, which helps our customers to make sure that they're buying the correct kind of software, but also if they look at the complete life cycle of the products that they purchased, that they see in reporting what they've purchased over a longer period, making sure that if they receive an audit or anywhere like that, that they have the information that they need to make sure that they have the right products and are licensed correctly. With that being said, our footprint at the moment is in 82 countries. We're 2,100 employees, and that's something that has changed over the last couple of years. In the last 4 years, that number has doubled. So 4 years ago, we were about 1,100 people, and in the last 4 years, we've pretty much doubled. With that, it's an exciting growth and transition. It means that our customers are believing in us. It means that in the market, we're growing. And for us, me and my colleagues in the integration department where I work, it's also a challenge. Because with having more customers joining us and believing in us, it also means that we receive more questions for integration. With that, we've created some processes that I want to walk through and some experience that we've made out of that. There we go. So the challenges of buying software are a couple that are listed in this slide that you can look at later, but there's a couple that I want to highlight. For instance, there's over 7,000 publishers that we work with that sell software. And because we are the reseller, what we make sure is that we have the pricing, that the items are available in our system, and even the publishers that are not that known, that we deal with as well, we make sure that if the requirement is there to have the items available and shown there, of course, in agreement, we are something that we can facilitate. With that large number is sometimes what makes it tricky, and that's where we try to be very good as well. With the number of items, we have 3.4 million items maintained by a large team that we have, which we call master data management, to make sure that all the information on the items that we have is accurate, it's up to date, and that if there's any product that shouldn't be there, that is also removed and communicated accordingly. And that's why with the customers, we try to do quarterly updates to make sure that if there's a change of item, that's available and that's known as well. From there, there's expertise that we have in portfolio management, so looking at the products being purchased on the life cycle from the beginning to the end. This could be a new version that's coming out, but it could also be that you're transitioning from a certain type of license to another one. And with that needs to be combined. From there, we have more than 2,400 clients globally, but with being in 82 countries, we also have a very strong local footprint. So we can facilitate and help out on a larger global scale, but we make sure we have the people locally and understand the requirements that can be different in each country. Every slide has a bullet point at the end, a very important one for us. And with that, this is the processes and systems of customer and Software One to be aligned. So it's important that we know what the customer wants, but also that the customer knows what challenges we have to make sure that we can procure, that we can integrate, and we have all the information that's required. So our approach is a two-way street. We've divided it up in 4 pillars. I'll talk about that in the next slide. That's how we approach EDI and B2B integration. But what I always want to show quickly is if you have software one in the middle here in this slide, we have EDI going both ways, and we distinguish between that. On the left side on the slide, you can see the publishers. So that's from the 7,000 that I showed you before. And on the right side, you can see the customer. Today, what we're talking about on the Ariba side, it's important to see that a connection through the Ariba network makes life for us a lot easier because there's a level of standardization. And if a customer is starting a project with Ariba to make sure that all our suppliers come onto the network, it then allows us to estimate as well with the beginning sessions of the customer to see how much time is needed, what requirements are there, and it's based on a model that we've done before. The approach, as I said, is cut up in four pillars, as we say. First one is catalogs. We have the statics catalogs that we talked about before. We also have the punch outs to make sure that the dynamic information for the product is there, so that if a price changes or a little bit of content changes on the description of an item through a punch out, it will be there immediately. Through a catalog, that will have to be an update, which we'll usually do on a monthly basis. If the price information is there, it's easy to pick the item and then send the corresponding order or purchase order to us, and having the approvals already gone through in your own system, or if in a different way it needs to be done, it can also be done on our side, as long as we know the processes that we've predefined with the onboarding process. Third one is billing. Invoices electronically are easier for us to receive and consume, but also for yourselves, of course. And with that is our third pillar, and it connects very strongly as well to our fourth pillar, and it twists in a little bit, because here it's very important then, if we have all these pillars in place, then the reporting that comes out, which is SAM reporting, for you that might not know with the terminology, software asset management, and it's very important to make sure that the licenses that you have are the ones that you need, of course, and in case of an audit, that you can see that you were completely licensed up to the point where it's necessary. And to be able to do that, you need to know what you've purchased before. And with that, with transactional reporting from SAM, that's one point further, but it's our fourth pillar, which is very important for us. It comes in that we need to correct the information from the beginning, even when we're only talking about having the addresses for the onboarding, which is the first phase to start the transactional part, and the catalogs, the orders, and the billing. If all pillars are in place, the information that comes out is 100% correct. If one of the pillars is not in place, the information can still be 100%, but it's not in the same guaranteed structure. So even with having, let's say, only one pillar, catalogs in place, then it's more possible to have a failure, because if we then get a PO that comes through a fax, it might be that somebody mistyped, making it a little bit more tricky. Just to show you a couple numbers there, we've done over 350 projects for over 170 customers in more than 20 countries. But it could also be that tomorrow we have a new request to add on in 40 countries or in 50. And that's the good thing about integration, and that's what makes it exciting for me personally, and also for all my members in the team. Every day can be a new challenge. And with that being said, the end-to-end thinking gives us efficiency, transparency, and compliancy. But it also comes some learnings out of this. And for the best practices from our side, for instance, with electronic catalogs, what we've learned is we always want to make sure that our customers are happy with all the requests that we receive. We can't always facilitate, because if there's only a couple of POs, then doing a full electronic catalog makes sense. If there's 50 products, if there's 20 products, but if you're talking about 500,000 products, perhaps then it makes sense to have a discussion first and see, can we reduce this? What do you actually want to purchase, to make sure that when you're trying to find your product, it's not very tricky and very difficult. Order automation, the same thing applies, because it takes time and energy from my department to make sure that this works correctly. The number of orders is usually connected to the savings. If we have 50 orders per year, then having, for instance, a full integration in place makes less sense, because especially through the Ariba network, if we get the PO that's created there via email, we can still process it, and there's not much time gained by having 50 orders or less automated. But If we go 500 orders, 10,000 orders or more, then of course the benefits that come out of there are greater. Invoice automation is the same case there. If we're sending out 5 invoices per year, we always try to see, can we use a PDF, or can we send one via post, or even via fax if that's accepted. But mainly if the number grows, then of course the benefits that we get out of there are very important as well. What is there important is that we map through standards, and this can sometimes differ as well, that a customer has a different standard that they want us to adhere to, or have other challenges, which is on the next slide I'll talk about for a second as well. On the reporting side I talked about before, if we have the right information, we can output in the reporting the correct information as well. If the information is wrong, there's a very nice term which I want to use, but I'll change it a little bit and say trash in, trash out. On the next slide, from the lessons that we learned out of this, which really can generate some savings from our side, but also on the customer side coming out of it. When we look at catalogs and punch-out, standard is often used and said, but it can be that customized is used there. The same goes if you look at, it's possible to have as many items as possible on there, but does it really make it easier? We believe not. Plus, if you're looking at a punch-out solution, if you have 90,000 or even worse, which we don't do at all, but let's say 3.4 million items on there, if you do a search, it'll take a second because there's so many products in there, but also will you find the right ones that you have or want? An order automation, an order field that can be very different. For instance, with software, end user information is very important. If you buy a license, who will use it? Will it be used in France? Will it be used in Germany? Because it's not a physical item. You can of course say this license is being used in Germany, which is good, but we need to know who it is. So when we receive an order, it's a very nice structured way that in an electronic order, you have a nice field where it's defined and we're all happy. What sometimes happens, and one of the lessons we've learned out of this, is it could be a restriction of the customer that they're not able to tell us where it goes, and then we receive it in a commons field or something like this. Making it more tricky to automate that order, because if somebody misspells it or it's changed in any way, then a machine readable order is not possible. But we've got some tricks to go around that. But preferably, we in the first onboarding discussions want to try and get out of that and say, if we can have the information structured, then we're happy and we'll see less problems in the long run. Invoice automation, talked about it before as well, but it's very important that every country has their local restrictions, because there are countries like the US where sales tax are done per county, per state, and there's different ways of calculating that. But there's also countries in Asia where that could change monthly or in a week. And if you build a system that uses standards, then it's dangerous that this might change. So in that way, it's best to have the business logic done within the ERP, so we get that out. But one of the learnings is that it's not all the same. If you have it in Switzerland, yes, it stays the same. They have to vote if they want to change anything, which makes it easier and more standard. And the last one, on the reporting side, perfect item and order data comes back in saying, if we have the right information comes out, and data shown in the report must be defined from the start. If on each PO, a certain field needs to be there, then if we do not get this in the order, then we are unable to give it back. So then it's not trash in, trash out. There's actually nothing in and then nothing out. But if we predefine it in the beginning, it makes it a whole lot easier in the end to make sure that the reporting that comes out is something that's expected by the customer. All these together is, our experience with that is, all that together is there is no standard, therefore very good preparation is required. So we try and jump in the beginning of the conversation to make sure that we have all the details. Sometimes a little bit tricky because we try and structure it the best that we can, and the customers that we work with try and do the same. But it could be that on a later stage, information comes out that, for instance, we need to add another field or make a small change. In this case, we are very flexible, but whatever you can capture, you don't have to solve. So with that, combining it all together, it's a quick introduction into how we do business, where it comes from, and also some of the pain points that we've seen there from the supplier side. So at the end, if there are any questions, please go ahead and ask. Now I want to give the floor to Michael. Thank you very much.
So I'll try not to cough too much, but obviously you've heard I've got some difficulties. So several things. I'm going to build on basically what all the presenters have built on because it was very useful. Actually, it was more than enlightening for me. First things first. Why is integration important? So I've seen we have buyers in the room, we have suppliers. Lots of you apparently are experienced. Even though you're experienced, especially for suppliers, you may come across buyers which will be a bit resistant to integration. So why is that? Yes, of course, everyone believes that integration brings more efficiency. Like when you automate transaction, it brings more efficiency. But when it comes to Ariba solution, the reality is that not every buyer is looking for the same thing. I mean, they are not all interested in PO and invoice. They are not going full cycle. Some of them are only going PO. So when you're going PO, those buyers, they will think, I'm addressing myself to suppliers here, that basically why support the supplier and integrate? We don't really care as long as we have the catalog, as long as they can retrieve the purchase order via email, we're cool. So compliance is not always true, actually, when it comes to buyer. It is truer when it comes to suppliers. They tend to understand more easily which added value they can get out of it, at first. Also, you have to take into account, that's another topic, change management within the buyer organization. A lot of buyers, and I don't know if for you that's true, I see someone smiling at the back, so probably it's true. We come across companies where we've had large departments for really a long time. Everyone is asking us to basically be more and more productive. And when this kind of system comes into play, what happens is that, probably it's going to downsize the team. So that's not happening over time. We need to basically reallocate the team. I mean, it's not an easy journey, reallocating people, requalifying them. You're not firing like a bunch of 200 people like this. And that's generally not what's happening. But to give you an example, when Carrefour basically built its automation system, they did that over 7 years, and the accounting department was downsized from 200 people to 10. It's definitely not something you do overnight. So you have to understand when you talk with a buyer that maybe they also have all this consideration in the background. So it's a journey really on both sides. The collaboration, so how do we support this whole thing? We have a methodology in place, basically. So whether the buyer only wants the PO part and they're therefore mostly interested about catalog, or they want PO and invoice, the integration team always kicks in 3 months before we go live. And 3 months before we go live, what do? We do a reality check with the buyer. We say, okay, you've set up your system like this. Yes, you've done a unit test with your users, but have you really done a unit test with your suppliers? The one who will want to connect machine to machine. Because if you don't know if your solution is stable. Obviously, someone keying in orders on a web form where you have a logic which is built in, it's very different than a system generating all the transaction. The check-in logic is built in from this system, So we come into place 3 months before. We build a documentation kit for the suppliers. We select with the buyers pilot suppliers. We call them pilot because they're experienced. So Lirico was saying they're selected very often. Yes, they are. Becton Dickinson is started to be as well. Software One is amongst them as well. Why are those pilot suppliers important? Because as I heard during the Lirico presentation, they know the system so much in and out that they help basically the buyer to stabilize its solution. Because sometimes when we implement the solution with the buyer, when we say, okay, be careful, this rule is going to have an impact on the suppliers, they don't want to hear. And then it's suddenly, when we start testing, that they realize the whole thing blows off, and then suddenly they readjust. So again, change management. So that's why pilot suppliers are extremely important to the whole setup process. So efficiency, everybody is convinced. Does everybody run for that? No. You do have change management at the buyer side as well, team-wise, and also they don't always have the full cycle. So if they're only running PO, they just believe that catalog is the most important thing, and PO, suppliers get them the way they want. Collaboration, we try to basically work on getting the buyer to be more compliant with integration via a methodology whereby we have integrated sellers join very early on into the program as pilot their experience to stabilize the solution. Now, the integration option for the suppliers. So for the buyers who are here, that's probably interesting as well, because that can allow you to enlarge the scope of suppliers you're onboarding. Some of the things are not new, some others are new. Now, let's talk about the buyer. Like the scope of solution you have for suppliers on the buyer side is very wide as well. We do have a solution on premise, Ariba buyer, that's quite important. That's historical solution. We do have solution on demand, P2P. That's the same as Ariba buyer. It's a procure to pay type of solution. You issue order to suppliers. You can receive invoice. You can have all your workflow inside. Then we also have direct connection to the IT system of the buyer. That's called PO invoice automation, basically. And so some clients, they have all these type of solution mixed up, basically. They could have an Ariba buyer, but they could decide to receive their invoice via another link, etc. Why am I saying that? Because the landscape of the buyer is as varied at the end of the day as the landscape of the suppliers. So when you integrate, you have to take that into account in the scoping. Now, on the supplier side, so we do support various type of formats. However, when you think format, you also have to think transactions. What kind of processes does it cover? Because not all formats cover all processes. Like when I talk about processes, I talk about purchase order, order confirmation, ship notice, obviously, invoice, but we have a lot of new messages coming around basically the collaborative supply chain, so related to strategic sourcing. So we do support CXML. This language is a standard one, no limitation around that. We do support EDI, so the D98 and the ANC standard. However, be careful on EDI, there are some limitations. So both supplier and buyer, when you hear we support this format, you always have to be careful about the limitation. Because otherwise we, especially for the buyers, we start onboarding the suppliers, they're unaware about the limitation. Let's take an example. If I take the likes of Infineon, they're requesting a consolidated invoice because they have shipments coming from all over the place and that's kind of easier for them. But consolidated invoice is fairly rare, to be honest. And it's actually not so well supported on the Edifact adapter we have. Okay, so that's a limitation. So be careful when you propose to your suppliers ways to onboard. Not everything can work. Derbumi is more like suppliers who want to keep their native format. You know, they can have native format from their IT system. So that's one of the solutions. And then we added up two new solutions around SAP. Well, business one has been more than a year already that it's on, so it's more for medium-sized type of suppliers. It's a business suite. It's not so widely used, to be honest. It wasn't a big commercial success within SAP. It's like SAP trying to go from very large company to smaller size company. And the SDF add-on, and this one is really new. We basically connect all the ECC version 6 and above now natively from SAP to the Ariba. So that's the same thing as on the buy side, on the buyer side. So basically, if you're a buyer, you have the MM add-on. If you're a supplier, you have the SD add-on. It does not cover yet all messages, but it will by the end of the year, the way it's going. So order and invoice are covered. Order confirmation and advanced ship notice are coming in the second release. Now, talking about the best approach, so I'm just going to summarize on what everyone has said. It's all about scoping at the end of the day. And this is applicable for the buyer and for the suppliers. Too many times I see buyer coming on an integration with a supplier, they just have no clue. They have 4 questions prepared, they don't take it as a project, and it gets very messy. And the supplier, it's exactly the same. So couple of things. First, and Becton Dickinson actually really highlighted that, who is going to do integration for you? You're not IT at the end of the day. You may have an e-commerce organization if you're a supplier, and you may have the IT in the e-commerce organization. That's good. Some do, like IBM does, for instance. Office Depot does as well. Yeah. But ask yourself, do you really want to do that in-house, or is it going to be less costly for you to do the development outside? That's one thing. Second thing, when is it profitable to go from manual to integration? And the answer is actually it's hybrid. It depends on the volume of transactions, the country in scope, etc. Okay, so always ask yourself this question, because it's a costly project at the end of the day. You don't want to be spending 5 working days in terms of workload if it's not worth the transaction behind. So that's quite important. And you really don't have to have a unified approach. I mean, many don't. If you take the likes of IBM, Lyricos, I'm sorry, they don't have a unified approach to it. Yeah? Then, business processes. What do you support? Buyers think, okay, they come with their scope and they would say, you need to have this, that. So for instance, I have a lot of buyers, they say, oh yeah, I want to integrate my orders, but at the same time, I want to do change PO. Okay, man, if you start to integrate your orders, change PO, sometimes it's already too late. It's just the PO has been shipped, so just get that out of the scope. Otherwise, you'll never integrate it at the end of the day. I mean, we have the case with the like of Cognizant, for instance, where they do expect the supplier to integrate change PO, but most suppliers can't. Again, it's already integrated. So make sure you understand what the buyer wants and what the supplier can do. And half automation is always better than no automation at the end of the day. We have, again, like I heard on Becton Dickinson's side, like I do have now a list of questions that I'm going through. And that's really good. Prepare yourself a list of questions that you basically reuse on every project. Because it's always the same question around scoping that are coming. We do have, be careful as well, we do have a lot of new type of processes coming, like service entry sheet for those of you who are doing services. That's going to become interesting. Now we'll have a way to basically detail the service that is being ordered. So for software ones, that could be really interesting, I guess, at some point. Then we do have a lot of new purchase order coming as well. The scheduled release order, when basically you're going to start doing strategic sourcing with the application. We have a few clients starting, so that's going to be interesting. So when is it worth doing it? What are the processes in scope? Then what are you doing with your invoice? That is always puzzling me. I've seen many suppliers and buyers, they're going onto the solution and they are not aware that this is a taxi invoice solution. So basically you can make the electronic invoice the original. Okay, super, so the electronic invoice is the original. You've got no paper invoice. Have you thought about your archiving? I probably had 3 projects this year where the buyer and the supplier go live. They say their taxi invoice, but the archiving is not set. The archiving is not set by Ariba. That's very important. We generate the original invoice. You need to do the archiving yourself. So you need to plug a solution in. We'll have a solution soon actually to propose, but for now, you need to plug it in. And make sure you do comply actually with the e-invoice requirement. And that's on the buyer side. A lot of buyers now are going pan-European. Okay, super. But the legislation is not the same in every European country. So you do have to set the rules. And believing, because your tax department is telling you that if you have the default rule, it's going to work, it's not. The legislation is not the same. So we do have rules on Ariba that allows you basically to segregate per country, and it's critical to actually set it up. And then the regional scope. So again, make sure when you're scoping with your buyer or with your suppliers, you know which region you're talking about. Some region, I mean, it's true for buyer and supplier alike. Some suppliers may have different ERP, different business processes across regions. So They may not be able to support integration everywhere. For some buyers, it's exactly the same. Now we're supporting Asia Pacific, but for instance, if you take Asia Pacific, yeah, in Australia, you can get integration fairly easily. Now, talking about India, integration is still not something that interests them so much. Process-wise, man-wise, I mean, there's no need. The workforce is too cheap in a way, so they keep on rekeying. Yeah? So I reused, because I really loved this sentence when I read it, so I saw there was no copyright. Really ask, don't assume. It's a great statement. Too many times, it's like I see sellers and buyers like coming to a call and we're trying to coordinate for the scoping and they have no question. I mean, I come to a project, I started, I have question. Because the scope is going to be misaligned. You have your own words, your own acronyms, the seller has its own acronyms as well, so we're bound to misunderstand each other. We don't speak common language to start with. Yeah? Okay. Thank you for joining. And we can go to Q&A.
Great. Well, I want to first off thank our terrific panelists for really sharing some great insights. And now I want to open up to the audience for to all of you to ask any questions that you might have.
Perhaps a comment?
Yeah, please.
A comment. I'm rather on the buyer side, and I hear on the selling side, oh, it's sometimes so difficult to onboard the buyers. And on the buyer side, the selling is, gee, how can we onboard, let's say, more suppliers? So, yeah, what's the problem here? What is the, let's say, what makes the difference? What's the driver? I would assume that reaching some let's say some productivity levels, either on the ordering side or on the let's say procurement, accounts payable side is kind of a key driver. But what is kind of what unlocks the let's say the appetite, let's say on the selling side? The product seller, the woman straight to the buyer.
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. I think sometimes what we have, and I think Michael said it very well as well, it's a part, first communication, that we need to understand each other to make sure that it's easy to do if we both know what needs to be done. And that's sometimes a little bit difficult because the questionnaire lists, I think we all three work with it to get the first bit of information out, because I've been into calls sometimes where everybody starts speaking and there's not a lot of exchange of information. It's more, this is what the requirement is, and this is what we need from our side, and we try and mix and match and come out of it. What we do now, what we changed over the last couple of years, is that when we send out that questionnaire, we try to have that as a prerequisite for the first call, so we know what the customer wants, and with that as well, sometimes it even helps the customer also to define from their side what they're trying to achieve. Because internally there could be a couple of questions that need clarification, and if that's done in front of the call, so the scoping can be done, it means that the expectations can be set, because that's usually problem number 2. After the scoping is done, we know what needs to be done, we can give timelines back. We know that we have a queue of so many projects we can work through. We say it's going to take about 6 to 8 weeks before we can realize this. The customer knows this and thinks, oh, perfect. We know what needs to be done. We knew when it's going to be done, and there might be some hiccups along the way for stuff that wasn't known before or couldn't be scoped. That always happens. It's the funny surprise that makes the job very, very interesting for me. But with that being said, I think if the expectations match with what needs to be realized in the scoping, I think that makes it a little bit easier. But I think that's the misunderstanding that sometimes takes place, is why from the supplier side it's sometimes difficult, and also from the customer side, the buyer side, it's also the same.
And if I can just add on to that, I think it also depends on the level of maturity that both supplier and buyer have on the platform. If you have two very mature partners, the integration is really easy. If you have a complete new seller or a complete new buyer that has a project to either integrate with all their sellers or all their buyers, and you're acting as a pilot, it's going to be a lot harder, because they may not know all the implications of one decision of having this field filled with that information and that field filled with that information. So that's why, and I think all three of us have stated it over and over again, the communication, the scoping up front, and understand why certain requirements are there. What is it that you want to achieve in the end?
Great.
So I'm also from the buy side, and we're also trying to pull in sellers into the network. Have you done the reverse? Have you focused, hey, you want to buy with us, channel through Ariba, so onboarded customers, so to speak, instead of us onboarding suppliers?
If I may here, there's two things that I'd like to come back to the question before. I was wondering if there wasn't a second axis to your question where you're asking why supplier don't join, basically.
Yes, fine.
Also.
Indeed.
So one thing on that, the strategy you define first to communicate and the type of information also you send through the network is going to help you onboard suppliers. For instance, if you're sending payment information, like okay to pay, is really a trigger. If you can start saying that to a supplier and they can manage their cash flow better, that's probably going to increase the rate drastically. So that's one thing. The model also that you apply in terms of funding, for instance, so do you want, for instance, to support at first the subscription of the suppliers so that they join the network and start seeing the added value? We have quite a lot of buyers actually doing that, and they are the one being successful, to be honest. And after a year or two, this model is being switched back to normal, but by that time you have the onboarding. So coming back to the second question, sorry. Yeah? So business model and basically the information you send.
And I think if I understand the question that you were asking, it is, do we sometimes identify as well which customers could benefit from having a level of optimization?
So if they approach you,
Yes.
you push them to
That's
an already known channel instead of a new one.
It's a very good question, and with that, it is definitely an answer yes. What we do from our side as well, we look at reporting, look at volumes of invoices, orders, quotes being generated, and then because we have quarterly reviews with our customer, sometimes the discussion comes up as well as have you got any technical system that can support this or that could do an integration, or have you ever looked at platforms like Ariba that could make, for instance, transactions and the possibilities a lot easier for yourselves. But this is a conversation that we do a little bit proactive, so it comes up in some forms, and we try to educate our sales force as well so they're aware of the possibility. But because we have so much demand in our team for these integrations, we're not doing it in a proactive level. So we do it a little bit proactive by looking at the high numbers, because we can also affect savings for ourselves as well, of course. And on the other side, we make sure that our sales force is aware of our capabilities, so they don't have to say no, or even sometimes they proactively go to the customer and say, can we do this? And then they come back to us very proud, having gotten the training from us on what we do, and then saying, I've got this customer, they've been a customer with us for 5 years, and they're very interested, and we've had no initial conversation. And it's very good for us, it's very good for the account manager that does that. It just does add on to our queue, which with our expansion is sometimes a little bit tricky, but that keeps us going in a way.
If I might add a comment to that, I'm a seller account manager at Ariba, and so we work with sellers on and sometimes sellers like Becton Dickinson want to find more buyers on the network, but we are not allowed to share that information unless one of our buyer customers explicitly agrees on having their name exposed. So we have only a short list that we can share. So if any of you thinks it could be beneficial to have your company name added to that list so that sellers can proactively find you through us, then I would recommend you also to reach out to Ariba and get that done, because it can really help you to get connected more easily to sellers like Becton Dickinson who are looking for a new buyer.
Maybe an additional question to Anne. What I know of your life science stuff, it's more like configurable stuff.
No, well,
What's that handle in the catalog, and how do you handle it?
no. So the configurable stuff would be the instruments that you would be referring to. We do not sell our instruments through the website, but we have a portfolio of about for life sciences about 9,500 antibodies, which are really commoditized products. So they're just a commodity, and there it's very easy to sell them through an e-commerce channel. For our instruments, What we do have some of our life sciences customers that are buying from us through Ariba. They would have the discussion on the instrument up front with the sales manager, with the salesperson, because of course an instrument, it's you don't buy it for $100, so it's quite expensive. So it really depends if you want to have it customized or not. But then they would push the order as a non-catalog order through the Ariba network.
One of the challenges that sellers sometimes face is that buyers will have different networks. It's heresy to talk about it in here, but Ariba is one of many alternatives. Are Ariba thinking about becoming an open carrier for communications with SideQuest or Cooper or the other interoperability, so that you could be a seller on Ariba, but sell to buyers who were on a different network as well, so that you actually have less work as a seller to do, rather than having to integrate with all these multiple networks.
Yes, on the pure buy side, so Ariba, to answer the question first, Ariba is buyer centric to start with, so it's procurement to pay. Ariba issues the order basically, or a module connected to Ariba, and can receive an invoice or any supporting document to the order basically from another network. So the inbound way is something that is definitely being considered, and actually there are connections that do exist. Yeah, the outbound way is much more problematic, just because the PO wouldn't be issued through our network, and the whole network is about the matching between PO and invoice at the end of the day. So
inbound you do have interoperability
Yeah.
options.
and there's
Good.
there
Do we have additional questions? Yes.
Just a comment, because it was just coming up the question, how do you do management of products with configurable products? I'm from the supplier side, from Dell. We're selling computers that needs to be configured by the customer. And this is, for example, sometimes really a problem, because in the, I said, overall, it doesn't matter if it's Ariba or a partner of Ariba selling the solution. The seller, they awake expectations that paper for the copy machine are audible in the same way as a computer or a car or a complicated machine. That is something where the point comes in. Communication and expectations management on customer side is very critical at the beginning, because these checklists will help you for a lot of problems. But if, from a sales perspective, the customer is saying, oh yes, the consultant or Ariba is doing everything for me, I don't need resources for it, and I just take it, that will not work. And we have made the experience that if project starts, and we know the business is, there's a tender, we have now 3 months to bring everything live, and then they start integration, and at some points it came up, yeah, but we had expected to get this or this, and then we say, no, that's technically not possible. So communication in front is the key point for success. For configurable product, definitely and mandatory. I can understand that products that are standardized, like paper, a pencil, a chair, or stuff like that, are easier to manage because you have one dedicated article number. But for a car that you can get in gray, blue, pink, with dark windows, with colored windows, there potentially may not be the possibility to have a dedicated article number that fits, because the next car that is ordered is in green and needs to get a different numbering, so the setup is different. And here is really main requirements: communication and expectation management at the beginning. The supplier must not be splitted by, oh, this is the highest value and promise we will get the top 10 onboarded, and the customer, oh great, I have 2 million revenue, that brings me 200,000 savings in my procurement process. Great, wonderful, now make it, and afterwards we say, oh, now we have reduced it to 20,000 because 9 of the 10 we couldn't get online based on
I can assure you that also for office supplies, you need a very good communication with the customer. So maybe on a different level, but still necessary.
And I think that the checklists that we're referring to are more a guiding instrument for the discussion. It's not a checklist where you say, yes, I've asked this, and yes, I've asked this, and can we do that? No. I need to understand, do you want to do cancelled POs, and for what reason do you want to do cancelled POs, and do you really want to do cancelled POs? Because if you do cancelled POs, our order has already left the warehouse. Do you know the implications? That's why we have the checklist, not to say yes, no, yes, no. It's really to start a discussion. I think that's important, more than the ticking the boxes.
Yeah. We often get the question, why do you need to know so much about our internal processes?
Yes.
That is standard, and especially, and for big companies, they are aware of it. They're providing integration guidelines at the beginning. That helps a lot. But in the smaller and medium business size, they very often, why do you, because they say, we build something specially for you based on your requirements, with a dedicated catalog for you, with a dedicated pricing for you, and we need to understand to manage your expectation in the right way and make from the beginning clear this is possible and this is not possible. And very often we notice when we go to the customer and ask, okay, let us first start. Who is the user who's selecting the product? How do you want to be the product selected? That the customer says, yeah, but we just want to get a punch out. And I say, yeah, but we need on the other way around the electronic order for it. Otherwise the punch out would not make sense for you and also not for us. So we talk with them about the process, and we notice that the customer haven't think in these little steps himself, because we are just talking to the procurement guy, and he has never talked about potential solutions to the IT guy, or he has talked only to his finance director saying, hey, you must reduce your cost by minimum 10% within the next 12 months. Find a solution.
Yeah, we're talking here about something which is definitely identified as a gap in between brackets. It's like Ariba historically is a technical solution implementer. They were setting up solutions, and we had actually a consulting team that was helping setting up the solutions in the past. At some point, this functional branch, which is Accenture, was spun off. Okay, and now clearly we are in a situation where we're setting up the solutions. That's a consulting team. We do have experience in onboarding suppliers, that's for sure, and in integrating them. Where we're missing something is really the functional piece. We do expect the procurement or the account payable organization to explain to us how they work, but very often when they engage onto the journey, it's the first time for them, they don't know. So this for me, and we're talking a lot about it within Ariba for already 8 months, in EMEA at least. There was at some point a setup where we were having SAP functional consultant for big buyer program actually joining in. That helped a lot at the beginning of the setup. And obviously there will be further steps, because we know that's really what can speed up the journey and prevent all these scoping issues afterwards.
Great. Good. Do we have additional questions? Okay, well, thank you all very much for joining, and thank you especially to our panelists for great presentations. And please do fill out the session survey if you haven't already, and enjoy your evening tonight.